Recently, I've fallen victim to the ultimate betrayal. You see, I'm an Imperial Knight player. It's the only real army I have. And just as I'm in the middle of replacing all the melee weapons with sick-ass drill arms, I get this putrid little message from my friend. Hey Shagrot, I'm starting an Imperial Knights army. This is the only guy I play Warhammer with. We can't both play Knights, that's insane. That's like having a threesome with another guy. Your interests are just too aligned, you both want the same thing. Plus deep down you know it's a contest and it just devolves into a jousting match. So it looks like it's time for me to find a new army. But there's an issue. Whenever I sit down to cook up a list or a themed army, it always ends up being really toxic. I'm not the pub stomping type, I just like making funky armies. So for this video, I want you the viewer to put yourself in the shoes of my theoretical opponent as I go over my stupid ideas, and I want you to let me know if you'd consider these lists toxic. My first idea for a new army landed on Imperial Guard, an army that I don't actually like that much. I'm not really a modern military kind of guy, and I'm not a fan of infantry spam, and I think Rogue or Dawns are really stupid. But what I do really like is artillery. And I really like artillery. It began with my burning love of playing artillery mages in League of Legends, but eventually kind of spun into its own weird autistic interest of mine. And I think the idea of running an army of nothing but ginormous guns perched at the very end of the table, volleying wave after wave of indirect fire is just awesome. Just saying that makes me want to impulse purchase an entire army. Historically, however, Imperial Guard artillery might be some of the most poorly balanced, unfun, and degenerate units you can possibly play against. It removes one of the fundamental skills of the game, which is strategic positioning, and rewards really sloppy play. Building a full artillery spam army is just a total that guy thing to do, which is such a shame because they just look so cool. I'd want 3 Basilisk, 3 Manticore, 3 of the new artillery piece, and a shitload of mortars. Right now, that list would actually be pretty bad. They've butchered most of these units in the new book, which I actually consider a positive. I think right now, most people wouldn't mind playing against this list, but who knows what direction Games Workshop will take them in. It's just not very future-proof. Of all the ideas I'll be talking about in the video, I think this is the one I wanted to do most. Idea number 2. If I had to pinpoint what I considered the single best model Games Workshop has ever made, I think my answer would be the Kroot Rider. The way it stood is so animalistic yet somehow really noble. It's just an unbelievable sculpt. I absolutely love it. Gorillas are probably my second favorite animal, just ahead of dung beetles and just behind proboscis monkeys. And when I saw the Lone Spear model for the first time, axolotls being another top 5 animal for me, I committed to building the army. I was blown away by how cool the Kroot were. I picked up the Kroot army box off Facebook for 40 quid, which was an absolute steal, and I fell in love with the army. I'm not a very confident painter, knights are the only thing I've ever painted, and even then I painted my entire army one night before a tournament. But these guys take to contrast paint so well, it was the first time I ever really enjoyed painting. With Kroot locked in as my new army, despite how awfully expensive they are, I started to ask around local groups I've never played with before so I could get some practice in. And I got some really unexpected responses. People just didn't want to play with me, citing that chewing through 120 Kroot, no matter how squishy they are, is more of a chore than a game. This was genuinely really upsetting to me. Unlike my other lists that were hypothetical, I already had a small army put together, and I really wanted to play with it. With Kroot being so cheap point-wise, and me not wanting to dip into the Tau part of the Codex, there wasn't really any other way to run Kroot without mass infantry spam. The silver lining of not picking this army is that I did suspect I wouldn't enjoy them long term. I tend to prefer elite armies, and I feel like lugging over 100 models every turn doesn't sound like it would be that fun for that long. Okay, idea 3, you're gonna need to hear me out. My favorite way to play literally any game ever made is to be a summoner. Summoners are just the absolute coolest. Just sitting back while the little dudes you brought forth into the world do all the work, like you're some sort of cancel estate mum, is just peak. But for some unfathomable reason, Games Workshop has taken every possible measure to remove this from the game. It must be the easiest way imaginable to milk people for more money. I'm as tight as a Minecraft YouTuber's girlfriend, but I would go out and buy an extra 1,000 point of models without question if it meant I could summon them throughout the course of a game. But no, Games Workshop insists it's too unbalanced as a mechanic. 2 issues here. Firstly, just fucking balance it, that's literally your job. And 2, it's not even true. I remember when I just got into the game as a kid, everyone at my locals was obsessed with the Khorne Demon King book. And to this day, people consider that one of the best books they ever made. But despite Games Workshop's best effort to keep summoning out of 40k, there is still a way. My third stupid idea for a list was a Tyranid spore mine spam list. The idea is that you max out on all the spore mine units, that's 9 biovores, 3 harpies and 3 spore cysts. And turn after turn you use them to crank out an unending amount of spore mines. Spore mines aren't the coolest thing you could summon, they're no greater demon, but I'll take what I can get at this point. Now I've actually had this idea for several editions now, but each time I think about putting it together, someone finds a way to abuse it and it gets nerfed. In the last edition, there was a brief window where it was actually the best way you could play Tyranids competitively. Spore mines are probably the most efficient objective taker in the game. In 10th edition, the list just isn't really functional, with abilities being once per model, spamming all the spore units doesn't really do anything, and they're wildly overcosted. Harpies are 215 points. And why is this list so toxic? To tell the truth, I don't really know. I guess it's just a bit uninteractive. At least once an edition I'll look into this type of army, and from the comments people just really don't seem to like it. List number 4 is really straightforward, it's just oops, all Castellan robots. I've never played against, or known, or even spoke to an AdMech player before, but I do suspect these guys are probably a fan favourite. My girlfriend and I personally fell in love with them after watching Hammer and Bolter. The Castellan robot in that was oddly really cute, and as such, I'd really like to build an entire army of them. Now, unlike the other lists I've mentioned, this is actually a totally legitimate and non-toxic way to play AdMech. They even have their own detachment. The issue is that one day, Castellan robots will be the best datasheet in the book, and then my army goes from a quirky army of my favourite models to, wow, 18 of the best unit, huh? Real creative. I guess the other issue of this list is that if I really wanted to go all out spamming one model, the Kroot rider is just a bit cooler, so I think I'd rather do that. List number 5 didn't make it very far in the theory crafting pipeline. I gave up on it so quickly, in fact, I didn't even decide on an army. But I really want to make a stalling list. I love playing stall strategies in games. I've played every card game for as long as I can remember, and my all-time favourite deck in any card game was Warlord Stall. I remember learning about how a deck was able to win a big tournament with no energy and without ever attacking. And to me, that was the coolest idea ever. I love that the deck played so differently. It played on a different axis. And I think taking that idea and bringing it to Warhammer would be really cool. I think the best application of this would be a super durable army that just sits on objectives until you win. The reason I never went with this idea is I just don't think it would work. The game's way too killy. I don't see how you could even play that style of game. I think if I would have gone with this, I would have chosen Nurgle Demons, as they're really durable and also kind of expendable. Also, my girlfriend has a full Nurgle army, so it would have been pretty easy to put together. I don't really need to explain why this one's toxic. I can't think of a situation in any game where stalling your opponent wasn't uninteractive or just unsportsmanlike. Everything I learned from the last 5 lists I've built led me to my final decision for my second army. I decided to tone down the gimmick of the list itself and put my uncontrollable urge to be different and quirky into the hobby side of thing. List number 6 is Custodes, just Custodes. I guess you could argue they're a bit stat checky in themselves, but coming from Imperial Knights, it's definitely an improvement. My plan for this army is to kit bash them with Age of Sigmar bits to make the Bugstodes. The idea came around because 1, I just really like bugs, but 2, I kind of don't like the Dawn Eagle jet bike. I'm not sure why, I'm just not a jet bike guy. So I spent a couple of hours browsing Games Workshop's catalogue to see what you could replace the jet bikes with, and I found these beauties. Now how cool would these be as jet bike replacements? I managed to get all the bits I'd need for a test model off of bit sites, and I gotta say, it's worked shockingly well. He sits on the bug model surprisingly naturally. The bug didn't come with a face for some reason, which is a bit unsettling, and the rider is missing a lot of bits here, but the concept is definitely there. I bought some iridescent blue paint that really looks like the shell of a beetle, which thematically was perfect, but I didn't like how dark it was. I don't really paint much, but when I do, I tend to go for blisteringly bright colours, so I decided to go for more of a safer green. And honestly, I kind of love it. It's really patchy because I suck at painting, but I think with some practice I'll overcome that. And like the guy from my threesome analogy, he's got an asshole that needs to be filled. There's also 2 holes on the top of the bug where I had to cut off the original rider, but I do think it will look really good once I put some time into it. Lastly, I really hate painting tiny weapons. I had the idea for this sort of like wasp sting lancer look, but I don't know, I'm not sold on it. I think it clashes too much with the green. Regardless, I think expanding this into a full army with lots of flying bugs would make for an incredible army. This leads me to what comes next. I've only just returned to the game and I've only played like 3 games of 10th edition so far. I've got a tournament coming up in a couple of months and I'm undergoing a serious training arc. I'm going to be learning how to play 10th edition, learning how to play Custodes, how to play the game competitively, and all the hobby stuff that comes with it. And I'm going to be making lots of videos along the way. I cannot stress to you guys how bad I am at this game. I seriously win maybe 3 or 4 games an edition, so I've got a long way to go. If you want to stick around to watch the Bugstodes grow from a harmless idea to a tournament topping powerhouse, make sure you subscribe. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. Cheers.